It's time once again for another edition of Talk to Me. And now, here's Emmy himself, 8-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Maynard Eaton.
Hello again, and welcome to our weekly conversation with business, cultural, and political influencers. And today we have one of the sharpest political minds in the Southeast, if not the nation. Her name is Ufot, the CEO and executive director of the New Georgia Project. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Maynard.
Black women have been showcased throughout this week and throughout this year, seemingly, but they've really becoming the shining lights of the Democratic National Convention. Is that not true?
They've always been the shining lights of the Democratic Convention. It's just that their labor has been ignored.
What's the difference now, you think? What has turned the tide for Black women politically?
I think that the crisis that we're in is extreme. Again, I think that there are powerful, ancient and recent examples of the Democratic Party and the dominant society at large turning to Black women, to women of color, and to women in general to cover up their messes, to fix what they've broken. And the severity and the urgency with has party leaders forced political leaders to, like I said, we can't play around, that the urgency of the moment that we're in is too great. And what we are facing requires some grown-ups and some people who know how to fix problems. We're talking about a global pandemic where 200,000 people have died. And in a place like Georgia, where over 100 people are dying every day, we're talking about racial uprisings because of police and continued unaccountable murders of unarmed Black folks. And we're talking about an economic crisis, right? 40 million people unemployed. 12 million people about to be evicted. Georgia just cut $1 billion with a B from this education budget. Parents have no idea what to do about educating their kids, their students. And so there are 12 to 18 hospitals in rural Georgia are about to close because of our failure to expand Medicaid. So any of these issues on its own would be considered a crisis that we need to pay immediate attention to. But they're all happening at the same time while our democracy and elections and our census and the post office are all being attacked. This is not a job for children. It's not a job for children. You bring in the grown-ups.
And that's Black women, huh?
Absolutely.
That's the answer to our issues.
Absolutely.
What is the naming of Kamala Harris as our vice president? What does that say? What does that represent? What's the significance of that, other than just being the first woman of color? Her political clout adds to her nomination as well, does it not?
I think so. I think that, as a child of immigrants, I think as an HBCU graduate, I think the thing that really sort of, touched me in my heart parts when she was doing her acceptance speech was, she talked about the first time she entered a courtroom as a prosecutor, and, your opening statement, you in a courtroom where Kamala Harris for the people, right? And I thought that was so powerful. And I think that is what people are looking for in this moment they're looking for leadership, like clear, decisive leadership. Folks who can demonstrate that they not only know what the problem is, but that they have an idea about how we can solve it and how we can solve it together. And I think that that's one of the things that's represented in her sort of previous leadership, but I think that's also one of the things that, her candidacy represents. One, a knowledge that women and people of color are the base of the American Democratic Party. And so while there is a whole bunch of rhetoric around reaching out to Republicans, reaching across the aisle, trying to get disaffected conservatives who are unhappy with the current administration to get under the big tent, at the end of the day, you chose a Black woman to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. And I think that's a powerful statement. I also think that, gosh, given what we know about leadership, right, in the corporate sector, et cetera, it is ridiculous that we've had 45 presidents and more vice presidents, and there's never been a woman in any of those roles. That's insane. It's insane. When we think about, again, who has brought companies out of crisis, who has brought sports teams, who has brought political campaigns, that we know that women's leadership is valuable and important and necessary. And so the idea that, we are almost 250 years into this experiment that we call American democracy, and there's never been a mother to take the reins is absolutely ridiculous. And if that doesn't offend you, that's fine. But the numbers bear out when we think about how countries have responded to coronavirus. Your likelihood of surviving coronavirus and reducing the likelihood that you will catch it it's a direct relationship to the gender of your head of state. So countries that are run by women have lower contraction rates than countries that are run by men. So, I mean, there's all kinds of anecdotes to support the argument, but on its face is ridiculous that there has never been a woman president or vice president in U.S. history. And so we are one step closer to changing that fact. And so I was moved, and it's a powerful moment in not only Democratic Party politics, but in U.S. history.
Speaking of powerful, you are featured in a powerful video production about the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave the women the right to vote, or as you say, some women the right to vote. Let's take a look at that.
If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair.
These words and others mark the story of Black women for ages.
And they also foreshadow the hollow victory in celebrating the 100th anniversary passing of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote.
You see, while it was for women, unfortunately, what it meant was white women.
From 1920 to 1965, that's what women's political empowerment looked like.
So we will speak our truth. Black women like Sojourner Truth, Mary McLeod Bethune, Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell,
and all the founding members of the then recently organized Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated fought two battles.
One for their gender and another for their race within that gender.
When the call was sounded to protest the newly elected President Woodrow Wilson's inauguration
by suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, it was done with the face of hurtful discrimination practices among the suffragists themselves.
Journalist and anti-lynching crusader Ida B. Wells said of leading suffragist Frances Willard that she unhesitantly slandered the entire Negro race in order to gain favor with those who are hanging, shooting, and burning Negroes alive.
And while she wasn't the only one using Black lives as bargaining chips and fighting over who is more included or who is more excluded,
I've seen this movie before. Last week, really.
Yet African-American club women kept on keeping on. Those of our past saw the vote as part of a much broader range of social, economic, and political issues surrounding their communities.
but hey, Black women were intersectional before your little think pieces made it cool. Someone we might have called Miss Ann 100 years ago could be the Karen of today, but we digress.
Shortly after 1965, Fannie Lou Hamer and Shirley Chisholm and Flo Kennedy immediately started showing us the way.
But it would still be another 10 years in 1975 before most Latinx, Native, and Asian American women could vote.
And that right to vote meant that these women would become the leaders themselves as mayors, senators, speakers of state assemblies, and members of Congress.
And so we march on, not apart,
But together, not with petticoats, but in pantsuits.
And braids and locks and sneakers and Crocs.
and from our homes and our phone, online, it was Black women.
Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, who helped us turn the words Black Lives Matter from a hashtag to a movement.
As Mary Church Terrell said in 1904, I should answer unhesitatingly, it is a magnificent work our women are doing to regenerate and uplift the race.
We celebrate the 19th Amendment's passage while we continue to fight for its promise.
And say, quite a production, and you look like a star on that video. But really, what are you really saying in that piece?
What I'm saying is that not only did the founders of Delta Sigma Theta risk life and limb in order to secure the right to vote that they actually wouldn't be able to enjoy for another 45 years. So while we want to turn up and we want to celebrate the centennial of the passage of the 19th Amendment, I think that it's also very important to point out that it would take an additional 45 years of organizing in order to secure the right to vote for women of color, and another 55 years of organizing to secure the right to vote for language minorities. The uncredited work, the uncredited labor of an Ida B. Wells. It was very, very important that we told the full story and that we told the truth. And mainly it's because, as someone who is building a voting rights organization and building an independent political organization that centers young people and women, people of color, that I don't have many examples to go by. And so I want to make sure that we tell the truth about how these victories are won so that generations behind us can look at the blueprint and figure out how to build movements that speak to whatever needs they have.
You also mentioned on a Facebook piece today that as a naturalized American citizen, this video, this right to vote, meant even more to you, does it not? Though it doesn't always live out to its promise.
Absolutely. I see the role of the New Georgia Project and many of the folks who, the storytellers, the journalists, the organizers, the activists, and people, the elected officials and people in our orbit. Our goal is to close the gap between the promise of American democracy and the way that people currently experience American democracy. So, as a naturalized citizen, but also just it applies to everyone. Anyone who's read the Constitution, anyone who's read the Bill of Rights, anyone who's, seen a story about America and how America talks about herself knows that there is a hypocrisy, right? There is a gap again between what is promised and what people experience. And so we want to close that gap. We don't want to be liars. We don't want to perpetuate a lie. And so how do we go about making that real? How do we go about making, of a government of, for, and by the people our reality?
I've had the pleasure of working for you and with you, but tell us about the New Georgia Project. What is it doing to close that gap? What is your role? You've become such a political influencer in the state of Georgia throughout the country, but the New Georgia Project is your baby, right?
Well, our founder is none other than the illustrious leader, Stacey Abrams. But yeah, I'm the CEO of the organization. I have taken her baby and grown it and fostered it, or fostered it, and it's a real boy. To date, we've helped almost 500,000 people of color and young folks register to vote in all 159 of Georgia's counties. We build video games. We have a pretty bold and robust research agenda that's designed to help us really understand how to move Black people and how to move young people to the polls. I don't think that by virtue of my Blackness or by virtue of my gender or my youth, that how makes me an expert in Black politics or an expert in youth politics. We actually study to show ourselves approved, right? So we will likely have about 1 million conversations with Georgians of color in the on our path to moving people to the polls this year. So yeah, we've on the verge of registering 500,000 Black folks in Georgia, and I think that the work that we do is a part of the work that is happening to build a better Georgia, to sort of build out the future of our dreams, where Georgians and Georgia families move survival to thriving, and what that looks like, where we have elected officials who are accountable to us, where the minimum wage is above $5.15, where we don't have hospitals that are closing because they can't afford to pay people. A Georgia that works for everyone.
Finally, we talked about the cloud of women. This year, this summer, and I'm sure you as an activist, you're a part of it, this Black Lives Matter movement started by women. What has this racial reckoning meant politically to you and those around you of the Black Lives movement?
Yeah, I think that it has meant one sort of an awakening. I think that there's a clarity and an elegance in how simple the demands are. Stop killing us. Right. We're done dying. Right. Of, for, and by the people. I think that, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, I think many of us are quarantining at home. Many people were working from home. And I think that has given folks an opportunity to connect the dots between the act of voting and the change that they want to see. And so while we are used to there being an obsessive sort of focus by the media on the presidential horse race, in this particular moment, because of the racial justice uprisings for the summer, there are tons of people that are asking questions about municipal races. There are tons of people that are connecting the dots between defunding the police and the upcoming city council races and the upcoming mayor's race. right? There's a ton of speculation about whether or not the mayor of Atlanta will be offered a cabinet position. And if the mayor of Atlanta is offered a cabinet position, then what does that mean for the 2021 mayor's race in Atlanta? And what does it mean for the activists who were out in these streets demanding reform from the Atlanta Police Department, right? And so there's a reckoning, there's an understanding. People are connecting the dots and people are putting together plans, and they're organizing. And, what a time to be alive. I think, again, there's an elegance and a clarity in the simplicity of the demands. And there's a sort of people have time to sit down, think, talk to their neighbors, talk to their loved ones, be honest about the future that they want to see for themselves. Be honest that if they keep it all the way real, nobody wants to go back to what we had before the pandemic. A lot of people keep saying, I can't wait for things to return to normal. But they weren't normal. They weren't working for most of us, right? And so this feels like a need to build a better future.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the brightest political minds in Georgia and throughout the nation. Thank you, Inse Ufot. It's a pleasure listening and learning from you.
Oh, thank you, Maynard. I love catching up with you. You are such a powerful journalist and truth teller and truth seeker, and your voice is necessary for this new world that we're trying to build, and I thank you.
God bless you. Take care. See you next week, y'all.
Take care.